Unfortunately, we've been seeing a lot of chaos happening in different parts of the country, and the elections kicks off in a few days. Campaigns will end at midnight on February 23rd, 2023, which is just 2 days before the presidential election. So today, we'll be looking at why the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, has decided to make a U-turn on taking both sensitive materials and non-sensitive materials to the CBN. Also, why did the Supreme Court decide to postpone the hearing of the suit banning the use of the old Naira to Wednesday, 22nd February 2023, which is just a few days to the presidential elections? How are you as a Nigerian or as someone living in Nigeria coping with the Naira redesign policies? How are you surviving on a day-to-day basis? These are some of the questions we'll be hoping to answer this morning. This is Election Countdown Nigeria, and I am Olive Emodi. Welcome back. Now, straight to our discussion today. The Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, through the National Commissioner and Chairman of the Information and Voter Registration Education Committee, Festus Okoye, has made a U-turn by saying that all sensitive materials for the 2023 general elections are in the custody of the Central Bank of Nigeria, as against what was earlier said by INEC Chairman Mahmood Yakubu on the 4th of June 2022, that all sensitive electoral materials will not be routed through the CBN. We're joined this morning by Ayo Adio, a public affairs analyst and communication strategist. He's also the managing editor of Avalon Daily. Good morning, and thank you very much for joining us.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
So I think we'll start the conversation based on, the last statement I made as to the statement by Festus Okoye and Mahmood Yakubu. Festus Okoye says sensitive materials will be deposited with the CBN. Mahmood Yakubu did say they would not be routed through the CBN sometime last year. The CBN has been in the news a lot lately. They're not particularly favorite, would I say Nigerians, a favorite of Nigerians because of the policies that they have imposed on the Naira redesign. Would you think that this is something to look at? Is this something that may be a cause of concern?
I think it's a credibility issue because the reason why it was stated at the 4th of June last year that you talked about, that materials were no longer going to be circulated via the CBN was because it became clear and obvious to many Nigerians that, the CBN governor appeared to be a member of the APC. And it would appear that, it would be a situation where the referee, is playing for one of the team if you are going to be putting sensitive material in the care of somebody who seemed to appear to be partisan. And so I think that what INEC did at the time was to douse the tension and to put out the statements that, sensitive materials will no longer be kept with the CBN. But of course, they have gone back to old ways and clearly seem to have dispatched most of these materials with the CBN across the country. The only problem now is how they are going to deal with the credibility issue, because the CBN has not just been in the eye of the storm, it is the storm in Nigeria as we speak today.
Absolutely.
So it's a case of, first, he's appeared to be partisan. Secondly, some of the actions he has taken lately has been interpreted as being politically controversial. And so to have him in the custody of these sensitive materials will cast aspersions on the legitimacy, of the election. So at the very least, the credibility of the institution to effectively distribute these materials in a fair, transparent manner.
Is this something that, let's also think about the reactions of Nigerians. I mean, you've raised a valid point. The CBN has not just been the eye of the storm, they have been the storm in more recent times. You think that is something that Nigerians will understand in terms of you saying it's a thing of a credibility issue? You think that Nigerians, the average Nigerian who's trying to get money to buy food, to buy fuel, would understand that? Do you think that they would maybe not assume that there's some form of foul play at work?
So, with elections, elections do not only have to be credible, it has to be seen as credible, right? And so what happens essentially is that politicians will begin to whip up sentiments, whether necessary or unnecessary. And you trust politicians who do not want to lose a presidential election will go to town with all sorts of propaganda against the CBN and perhaps the person of the CBN governor, just to score cheap political points. And you don't want that kind of cloud over a keenly contested presidential election that could swing in any direction. So for fairness and transparency's sake, I think it would have been the best option to look for an alternative to distribute these materials. But obviously, the action has been taken already, and so we had better brace up for the propaganda that would follow in the next couple of days, because clearly it would appear that the CBN governor has willingly or unwillingly been made an interested party or a factor in the 2023 presidential elections. And his actions and inactions be interpreted by various political parties in various ways as it affects their candidate or as it affects their chances in the election. So I would have assumed, I would have expected that INEC should have found an alternative. But since they haven't, you can just expect all sorts of propaganda from politicians in the next couple of days.
There's a lot that's been going on, especially with regards to the Naira redesign and the impact that it might have on the elections. We've seen protests, we'll come into that much later, breaking out in different parts of the country. Maybe I should ask you, this is on a more personal note, how have you been holding up?
I mean, we had a very tiny bet the last time I was on the show, and I told you that the deadline was going to be extended. And the reason is simple. We're a cash-dependent economy in many parts of the country, especially the rural agrarian economy. In many parts, especially in the northern part of the country, is really cash-dependent. And it's been very difficult for many Nigerians to survive this cash crunch. For people like you and I, we can escape a bit of the stress and hassle because we can shop at supermarkets where we can use our ATM cards, right, where POSs are available. But for a majority of the Nigerian people who transact daily with cash, it's been a problem for them, especially again for a lot of Nigerians who depend on tips, like the old woman who sweeps the road, the waitress who earns below the minimum wage, who survive on extra tips from Nigerians, have been suffering because they cannot get these extra tips, to live by any longer, and that's been a problem for our economy. So essentially, with one policy, we have plunged a lot more people. You had 130 million people in multidimensional poverty. I'd like to see the numbers by the end of February, because what we have done with this policy is to essentially choke more Nigerians and push them and force them into poverty and unemployment because they simply can't transact, without cash, especially, like I said, in the rural agrarian, economy that is predominantly in the northern part of the country.
It's just, it's rather sad to see how things have taken a downward spiral. Now, this is not the first time we've seen a Naira redesign crisis. We did have something like this happen in the 1980s, and we saw people sleeping in the banks. People found it difficult to, transact, and we worried. There were concerns that this might play out, and it's unfortunate to see that we're having a repeat of such incidents. Interestingly, President Muhammadu Buhari was the commander-in-chief at the time as well. We're talking some more about this and find out what your thoughts are as well. Remember, you can engage with us on Twitter at News Central Television to share what your thoughts are and share with us how are you holding up in this season. We'll go on a quick break. When we come back, there's more to talk about on Election Countdown Nigeria. Welcome back to Election Countdown Nigeria. The Northern Elders Forum, NEF, has called on Nigeria's President Muhammadu Buhari to assert his legitimate authority on any lawless group in any part of the country, especially, they say, the outlawed indigenous people of Biafra, IPOB, and to ensure that voters were not prevented or threatened during the general election. Meanwhile, the indigenous people of Biafra has condemned the incessant attacks on facilities of the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, in some parts of the southeast, especially within Iyala local government area of Anambra State and Osu local government area in Imo State. Now let's talk about this conversation, what's happening. We have Ayo Adio, who's been in the studio with us from the beginning of Election Countdown Nigeria. Thank you for still staying with us, Ayo.
Thank you.
You're seeing what's happening in the southeastern part of Nigeria. It's unfortunate incidents. There have been killings, there have been attacks on INEC facilities. It's not we've seen more than one attack, several attacks. What are your concerns as regards elections being able to, or do you have concerns about elections being able to hold in the East during this period?
I think that elections we hold, I think it was a few days ago, we saw in a particular market where one of the enforcers of this sit at home was essentially burned to death by angry traders who thought that they were disrupting economic activities. And I would argue that the reason that they became emboldened to take such actions was the fact that they want to participate in the general elections and they want to stand their ground to do that. So I'm confident that elections would hold. What I'm not confident about is the level of turnout in that election. If people would have the courage to go out and vote in numbers. So it's two things. I perceive that, or I predict that the elections in the South will be heavy policed and heavy militarized so that they can protect INEC staff, facilities, equipments, and all of that in the southeast. So it will be highly militarized and highly policed. And the question is whether or not that would encourage people to come out and vote, or that will force people to stay in their homes. So, to your question, I think elections would hold. The problem is the level of turnout. I am not sure that enough people would have the courage to go out and vote, given what we've seen in recent times, the attack on INEC facilities, the attack on some people who've gone to register to vote and even to pick their PVCs. So it's left to be seen if enough people would have the courage to come out in numbers, and vote in the 2023 election. And
it's really sad to think about the fact that lots of people will be disenfranchised as a result of insecurity.
Yeah.
Because even in the last elections, there were people, it's a strong factor when you're looking at voter apathy.
Yeah.
Why people wouldn't turn out. Everybody's thinking about their life and the safety of their lives and their loved ones as well. Let's talk about the riots that are breaking out in different parts. I want to hope that we have the video of the riots. What we've seen is that there are riots in different parts of Nigeria. If you look at the video there, we can see that banks are being burnt, cars are being burnt, people are angry. It seems that we're sitting on the edge of a ticking time bomb. There's a bit of tension in the environment. This is in Delta State, we can see the cars being burnt. What we probably didn't envisage was that it was going to get to this point. Bankers as well have had to see that their lives have been at risk. We've seen videos of bankers jumping the fence in order to be able to save themselves and to prevent themselves from experiencing the anger that people are feeling, which is maybe in some cases not directly the fault of the bankers. Some of them have been accused of giving money to a special select few. Did you see this happening? And what can we really do about it, Ayo? We're seeing different reactions, and their fear is that it will spread. The thing about riots and protests is that it starts to spread in different parts of the country. So what can we really do about it? It's looking like an impossible situation.
So I think first, the president has to take responsibility for what is happening in our country.
I'm glad that you said that. We're going to take that shortly.
There's no way. We have to call a spade what it is. He's the author, the chief enforcer, and the chief cheerleader of this policy. And he has to take responsibility for what is happening across the country. The argument that this policy is going to curb black money or minimize corruption or stop vote buying or actually fight inflation, for me is tokenist, if you asked me, because this policy has been tried consistently across the world and it's failed spectacularly. He did it in 1984, it failed. It happened in 1808 in Myanmar, it failed. In fact, the Indians did it more recently in 2016, where overnight they tried to change the currency and the president said it was to fight black money. 2 years later, the Central Bank of India claimed that 99% of the black money found their ways back into the banking system. So the policy simply doesn't work. So the idea that you're going to catch a few corrupt people by putting millions of Nigeria in pain and in misery is actually, I can't reconcile it in my head. Now people are breaking banks, people are being attacked, people are being killed in Edo State because of a policy targeted at a few corrupt elite politicians who already have been mobilized for these elections. I have said it before, these politicians will always have access to cash. The question is, how much cash will they have access to? Because they have friends in banks, some of them have interest in banks, some of them have shares in banks, some of them even own banks by proxy. So the idea that you're going to stop them from buying votes or that you're going to fight inflation by a Naira redesign policy that has been implemented in such a way that the supply side has been unbelievably shocking is for me bewildering, because people are suffering on the streets. People can't find they can't withdraw their money to transact. People can't pay for transport as at when due. They just can't. Their lives have been completely disrupted.
We're not even talking about the people who may have even died as a result of this because of health challenges. Now, I watched a video of a man crying in a bank saying that he's not being treated because he doesn't have money to pay. And it's not that he doesn't have money, he has money in his bank but cannot access it.
The most painful part is how people have been robbed of their dignities. How people have to queue for several hours to withdraw 200 Naira. How people have to trek for long hours because they cannot find cash to move from one point to the other. And I challenge, I like you to take your reporters to certain markets in northern Nigeria, for instance. Visit Adwa Market in Katsina and see whether they are transacting effectively. Visit Singa Market, visit Dawanu Market, whether they are transacting effectively in those grain markets. Travel across these countries in Katsina, Ala, whether they are able to trade their tubers of yams effectively.
I was able to speak
they
to
cannot.
Yes, I remember going to buy.
Dependent.
I went to a small market on the island here in Lagos, Nigeria, and I was able to speak to some of the market women. So these are people that transact on small scale, 100 naira, 200, 300. And I asked them, I even asked the man who changes the tire, how have you been able to cope? And some of the things they were saying to me was that the business has dropped drastically, and that people are not able to patronize them anymore. Because even if you want to do a transfer, they would want to add charges, because when they go to withdraw that money, they're going to charge them.
Exactly.
So what we're seeing is an unfortunate case of, there's a saying that it's better for 1,000 guilty men to go scot-free than for one innocent man to suffer.
Exactly.
But the innocent are really bearing the brunt of this. You did mention that the president should come out first and take responsibility. The president of the Federal Republic of Nigeria did address the nation this morning. There's a lot that was said, but let's share with you an excerpt of what he said concerning the Naira.
The old 200 Naira banknotes be released back into circulation, and that it should also be allowed to circulate as legal tender with the new 200 Naira, 500 Naira, and 1,000 Naira banknotes for 60 days from February 10th, 2023 to April 10th, 2023, when the old 200 Naira notes ceases to be legal tender. In line with Section 20, subsection 3 of the CBN Act 2007, all existing old 1,000 Naira and 500 Naira notes remain redeemable at CBN and designated points. Considering the health of our economy and the legacy we must bequeath to the next administration and future generations of Nigerians, I admonish every citizen to strive harder to make their deposits by taking advantage of the platforms and windows being provided by the CBN.
Well, that's an excerpt of the speech by the President Muhammadu Buhari, President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, and he was addressing the nation, talking about the challenges that is currently bedeviling the nation. He talked about the Naira notes and saying that the 200 Naira notes be still used as legal tender. Both of them are running concurrently. Before now, there had been chaos as to what exactly the position is. The CBN had the stand to say that this is a deadline. Then the Supreme Court came and said something else. But now we're seeing this. What do you think that this means? Do you think that this will in any way soften the hardship?
So, you see, the problem is twofold. And you see, the reason behind this policy is why we're experiencing the challenges that we're experiencing. Because normally, in terms of scenario planning, I would have expected that the smart people in the CBN will know that one of the best ways to implement a Naira redesign policy is to get the supply side perfectly correct, right? So if there's enough in circulation, we won't have the challenges that we're having currently. But because of the reason behind this policy, it is deliberate that the supply side is also facing a glut, because they also do not want people to mop up the new currencies from the supply side, which makes the aim of the policy counterproductive, right? So at the end of the day, we're playing Russian roulette with the lives of Nigerians because of your unstated reason to challenge a tiny political elite for their intentions in the elections.
I like that you say unstated reason, because, because he focused a lot more on being able to bring the money back into the banking halls as to the fact that this might be targeted at politicians.
So it really makes no sense to me, because already the menu has been served, right? If you love Nigerians so much, right, you should have intervened before the primary elections, or have created a system in which the primary elections are free and fair and allowed for some level of competition that allowed, people without money bags to emerge across political parties. Then would have argued that you probably love the Nigerian people. But you allowed the highly monetized primary election process, where money was the determining factor for the candidates to emerge. and now Nigerians have to choose between money-backed candidates, and then you turn around to say again that you want to help Nigerians so that the elections will not be monetized, when the process that set them to this point was already highly monetized. So, I mean, you look at it at the end of the day, the sacrifices being made for a failing policy is not worth it. If you actually care about the poor Nigerians, if you actually care about the poor and the future of the average Nigerian, then you should have, done your homework better and phased out this Naira in a way and manner that is not causing the kind of disruptions that we're seeing today. They are protesting in Ibadan, they are protesting in Ondo, they are protesting in Edo State. And what happens when protests are televised is that it instigates more protests across the country for reasons unknown. And I hope that this does not escalate to a point, where it becomes a national security crisis for our country. I really hope that that doesn't happen. So the ball is in the court of the CBN now to fix the supply problem in the next couple of days so that this situation doesn't worsen, because I envisage that politicians are going to push back now, very hard against the president in the next couple of days. And so it's the job of the CBN to solve the supply side problem so that we don't find ourselves in a national crisis.
Well, you've said it all. There's more to talk about this, and we would love to, of course, have you again, as we always do, to expand these conversations as we count down to the elections. On a much lighter note, someone did say that the CBN Naira swap policy was targeted at making one presidential candidate lose. I wonder what your thoughts are on that, but in 5 seconds.
Well, I think it's pretty obvious.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much, Ayo Adio, for joining us this morning. Do you believe in religious prophecies concerning elections and the election results? Let's take a look.
If they tell you that you will be rich in next 10 years, and you sit down in your father's house, say the Lord has said I will be rich, you won't be rich. You understand? If they said it partially, I will say I believe. You understand? And partially I will say I didn't believe, because it's not everybody God called. You understand? It's not everybody God called. Some call themselves due to their belly. So you don't expect somebody that he called himself through belly. He can't tell, he can't come outside and tell you, say, this person will be. Papa, if you go better now, you don't go without, it's gone.
Sometimes God used them, but sometimes they'll feel they have the power to say, because maybe the congregation, their followers believe in them. So whatever they say happens. But in terms of election prediction, I don't think what they're predicting is all about. They predict according to how they see the followers, how they see the people, where they see the crowd, the masses put their faith and their faith in.
How do you recognize a false prophet? The one that says this will happen and it does not happen because God has not said so.
I don't believe in any of them. I don't believe, because when we say A, we will see B. When we say B, we will see C. All things with God. Let's all put our hold with God.
Some pastors, we are not called by God. Are you hearing me? So their visions are not the things. Some speak according to what they feel. So some speak according to, I know one pastor last time. It's not a chosen, but he's chosen by God. Because he said they should not allow this Buhari and Tinubu them to enter, that their antichrist, their ruling is the ruling of antichrist. True. You can see how the country is turned upside down. Everything, the country is now sick.